Hey guys, welcome to round 4 recap of the open tournament I'm participating in here in Almaty, Kazakhstan. Today I was playing a young lady, Aya Tarkuzi from Kazakhstan. She's around 10, maybe 12 years old, very talented, very underrated obviously, so let's dive into the game. It was very interesting and the knights were jumping. You will love it. So I'm playing with white pieces and I was preparing for e6 for the French defense. I prepared some line against her French because she's a French player, and she surprised me by going c6. And this is like a meta game. The game of chess is not just playing with the pieces, using the pieces on the board, but it's also playing against a human, trying to predict on this meta level what your opponent has prepared for the game and trying to get him or her out of prep. And she obviously has prepared for the line, the Tal variation that I've been recently playing against the Kazakhstan that I've played in this very tournament, h4. You might remember the game where my opponent went queen b6, surprising me, and I sacked a piece. And eventually it was a draw in that very same tournament, so she obviously was prepared for this variation. Therefore, I decided to surprise her in turn by going knight f3, which I didn't do in this tournament. And I used to play this a lot. This is the Magnus setup that goes d5, d3, and if black trades and goes to an endgame, this is actually not as toothless as it might seem, because white often reroutes this knight to c4, goes a4, c3, puts the king on c2, slowly develops, maybe puts other knight here, maybe goes b4, and yeah, on the queen side, some pawn advancements are very frequent in this variation. I won numerous games in this one. So, as Soviet coaches say, with youth you should go to an endgame, so I was not minding this at all. I thought that I will be able to outplay my opponent in this endgame. But she didn't take. She thought for a long time. Obviously, she was out of prep. She's not a Kazakhstan player, so she doesn't know this. She felt that there is something fishy about this queen exchange, and she decided not to trade the queens and went knight d7, which is not a very common move. I've never faced it, actually, I think. So the common moves are either to trade the queens and go into this endgame, or to go bishop g4. It's also a very common move, or to go g6. I think these are, and queen c7 I've also seen. Yeah, these are the sensible moves. And she went knight d7, and I was like, what am I supposed to do? I think I used to, like when starting this position, I used to like consider all moves, all possible moves for black, and I thought that something like this I've seen. c4, because the knight can no longer go to c6, so trading like this is all right, because yeah, this pawn used to be taking the square from the knight, but now the knight will no longer jump to c6, so it's fine trading, and c4 puts more pressure on d5. Now this is looks like a Panov attack in the Kazakhstan, also another variation, but let's not delve into theory too much here. So I remembered something like this, but I mixed it up apparently, because I went c4 immediately. I thought that I'll be able to trade later, and this is already an inaccuracy. Black equalizes with best play. Black should take themselves, and this is apparently equal after e5. Well, it's not obvious for me. Obviously, yeah, my opponent didn't know the first line of the engine here. Also thought for some time and went e6. And now again, I should trade according to the engine, but I decided to put more pressure with the knight, actually, one of the best moves according to the engine. And now knight b6, and I like this maneuver, knight from d7 going to b6, I immediately thought that this is fishy, because you should not, first of all, this is a very important opening principle, you should not, whenever possible, move your piece twice in an opening when your other pieces are not developed. You should develop this knight, you should develop the bishop, castle, but the problem is that I'm putting pressure on this pawn, so knight b6 has some purpose, overprotecting, strengthening the d5 square. But the knight on b6 also is a bad square for the knight. Often white can kick it with a4, a5, and generally it's better to have the knight on c6, not on b6. But yeah, I didn't find a way to immediately exploit this move. I went queen b3, and she went a6, h6. Another inaccuracy, because you can't afford wasting tempi like this when your knight, your bishop, this bishop are not developed, you are not castled. So of course she wants to put the knight here and she wants to prevent bishop g5, but this is very slow. Again, I thought this is an inaccuracy on her part. The computer actually likes d4 here and says that black comfortably equalizes in this line. But yeah, I thought that after d4 I'll just drop back, maybe here, and then I'll put my bishop on g2, but yeah, the engine says it's 0.0. Okay, instead she went h6, and here I decided to continue development. Now d4 is not on the table anymore because two pieces are controlling the square, and I actually have a threat. I'm threatening to take here and then take on d5. So yeah, she defends d5. Now there are, like, all her pieces are defending d5. Two knights, the queen, two pawns, but also my pieces are all attacking d5. The knight, the queen, two pawns. Yeah, but for the time being, there's no danger to d5, and I decide to finish development and castle. She castles as well, all logical, and I have some advantage because I'm up in development, and her light square bishop is still not developed. It's a little bit stupid, seeing it's all pawns. Yes, it's on pawns. Yes, my large square bishop is also kind of stupid, but I thought that in future, if I go e5, d4, e5, d4, bishop d3, the bishop will be active sooner rather than later, and the life will be breathing. So for this bishop. So here I went h3, prophylaxis against knight g4. I thought this is an unpleasant move. Actually, the engine recommends e5. I was thinking about e5 for some time, but I thought knight g4. What didn't the engine like? Takes. And the knight is caught. The knight is caught. The knight has no squares. Wow. I somehow completely missed this bishop b6 idea after knight g4. I thought knight g4 and I have to go bishop f4, and I thought, well, who knows, f6, yeah, and she's striking me in the center. Yeah, but bishop takes b6 would be brutal. I completely forgot about it. So knight g4 is not good. She would have to go here, but this is obviously bad. Yeah, like I have too much space here. Rook fd1, rook ad1 according to the engine is the move, putting even more pressure. Yeah, okay, whatever. I didn't think about e5, knight g4, bishop takes. Instead I went h3 after castles here, and now e5 is on the cards, of course. So she takes, she tries to resolve the tension, but this is not good. She should have gone c5 here, trying to go for some counterplay, and then e5, knight here, something like this. Well, black has some counterplay, but white is better. Instead, she resolved the tension, and this is a mistake because now I'll gain a tempo on her queen with my rooks, and I have this bind with my c and e pawns, and her knight is bad here, her bishop is bad, so my bishop will be better once I put it on d3. So I was feeling really optimistic about my position here. She went queen c7, sidestepping with the queen, and I went a4. a4 is not the best move. Actually, e5 was the best move here, but I thought that this is like not that bad for her. Apparently, it's kind of bad. I'm overprotecting this pawn, and she has nothing. But okay, a4, a5 is also a good plan. Fighting against this knight and also taking as much space on the queen side as possible, because both my bishops, both the dark squared and the light squared bishops, are looking at the queen side. And usually you should play, if you have two bishops, you should play on that side of the board where your bishops are put in there like laser sniper rifles, so to say. So okay, a5, I want to go a5. She sidesteps, she wants to go knight c5. And ideally, if she has two moves here, she goes a5 and then knight c5, and this knight is secured on c5. I won't be able to go before, because yeah, if I king h1, for example, a5, and then king g1, knight c5, and I cannot go before, and this is a nice outpost for the knight. Here, black is better already. So of course, I did not go king h1, king g1. Instead, I took more space with a5, and now she will no longer go a5. I'm controlling the b6 square, and yes, she can attack me, of course, like this, but I'll just drop back, and next I'll go before and kick her out. away from the square. So that was my idea. Instead of going knight c5, she went bishop c5, actually a clever move. Here I had a strong move e5. I didn't consider it, because if she takes, I take the bishop. So the knight cannot take because the knight is overloaded. So after e5, she will have to either drop back with a knight, but it's very passive, or she can take here, but I'll take here. And if she drops back, I'll take here, and her king is very weak. It's still playable, but yeah, with some attack for white. e5. I completely missed this idea. Instead, I was considering whether I should take and go for this position with b5 later on, but I thought that I shouldn't rush with it, or I thought maybe I'll just block with knight d4. Because I have more space, and another important principle in chess is when you have more space, you shouldn't rush to trade the pieces. The side that has less space should trade the pieces. So yeah, but this is a mistake because she goes e5, best move. I go knight f5, and she just trades. And I thought from afar that this is a good position for me, but no. Because knight c5, she found this great maneuver. And now the knight will go either to d4 or to f4, and she has equalized. The computer already prefers even black slightly. So yeah, so of course I have to drop back the queen because it was hit. And now she goes knight e6, and either knight d4 or knight f4 are unpleasant again. So I want to prevent at least one of them. I go knight f5 to cover the d4 square. And here, for some reason, she didn't go knight d4. I thought this is like the logical move I have to take. And then my knight has to retreat, I don't know, to b1 maybe. Yeah, the engine prefers knight b1, but this is not a happy square for this knight. And yeah, after some maneuvers, maybe I will put the knight on a decent square, but it will take time, and black is a little bit better. I thought that knight d4 would be very strong. Instead, she wasted time, rook a8, some prophylaxis over protecting this pawn, I don't know, or protecting this square, but it was already protected. So a meaningless move that lost her the advantage. Now it's back to equal. I go rook d1. My idea is to put my knight on d6, so I want to have an outpost of my own. She goes knight f4, putting pressure here, and I'm not a big fan of trading your bishops for knights with no reason, but here you have a reason. This knight on f4 is much stronger than my stupid bishop on e2 that's seen the back the back side of its own pawns. So yeah, of course I could have gone bishop f1, but there's no need. Instead, I jumped in with knight, and here is where my knight started jumping, and here is where I started playing almost all moves according to the first line of the engine. I'm quite proud of this game. The coach also praised me. So knight d6 is a very logical move, hitting the rook. Also the knight on this square is a very powerful piece, controlling many squares in enemy territory. Rook spends another tempo, so she wasted 2 tempi with the rook, which is obviously a bad thing. And I go c5, again the first line of the engine, but it's also a very logical move, over protecting this knight on the outpost. She goes here because otherwise the point of c5 is also to free this c4 square for the bishop and put more pressure on f7. Next move I want to go here, and this would be crushing. So bishop e6 prevents this. She sees it, of course, and now I didn't really know what to do, and I decided, okay, I'll maybe push some pawns here and try to instigate b4. One of the best moves. Not the best move according to the engine, but one of the first lines. So here she decided to trade, and and here from now on until the end of the game, I make only the top engine moves. Obviously, I didn't know that at the time of the game. I just was trying to play moves that seemed logical in this position. So I took with the knight, because my knight on c3, it looks good, but it has no like reasonable squares to go to. So I wanted to reroute it, maybe to go to f5, jumping with the knights. And also I wanted to free the square of c3 for my queen to put pressure on this pawn, which I did later. So she goes b5. Of course, en passant is not forced. I'm not taken. It's okay. She has created even yet another weakness on c6 for herself. So I'm not afraid of this b5. Instead, I go queen c3, another top engine move. I'm taking this pawn. The only way to defend it is by knight. And now, whenever you have more space, you should do what? Do you know this? Another important chess principle: you should open up the position when you have more better piece activity development. You should open the position f4. This is just basic chess principles, and again, this is the top engine move, because whatever she does now, if she goes f6, well, f5 is strong, suffocating her and then pushing even more like this, or like rook d3, the engine suggests. Yeah, nice move. So f6 would be one way to defend. Instead, she decided, and if she takes, of course, I'll take with a knight, and this knight joins the action. Maybe it will go to h5 to put pressure on g7, and the position of black is already lost. Black is too paralyzed because all these pieces on the back rank are crumpled, and my knight controls practically all the squares. So a great piece, great knight. So instead of taking, she decided to be clever. Actually, the engine also approves of this. Bishop c4. She's hoping that I'll take and try to take this pawn, but then she'll take this pawn and she's back in the game suddenly. So of course I realized that this bishop, even though it looks scary, it's not stronger than my knight on d6. My knight is much stronger. So I'm not very keen on taking it, at least now. Instead, I go knight g3, top engine move. Leaving this pawn to be taken, because then I can jump in with the knight to f5. Look at my knights. Look at how many squares, important squares, they either control or attack. This is awesome. These knights are jumping, and they are formidable, and black is lost because queen g7 checkmate is threatened. Well, there are ways to defend it. Actually, knight f6 is one way, but then I can take on h6 and take here, and this is complete demolition. Then I'll somehow bring the rooks and checkmate, maybe like this. Actually, black can do nothing to stop this various checkmates. So queen f6 is one way to block this diagonal, and another move to block is f6, which she did in the game, but this doesn't help. Here I just take this bishop. Now I can't take it because this diagonal is very weak. She takes, I take with check, and she resigns, because if she goes here, queen f7 is deadly. If you go rook g8 here, now I can take the knight, and I'm up material and winning completely, and otherwise there is no defense for the g7 square. This knight is also pinned, so it cannot leave its post. So king g8 loses, king g7, king h8 and king h7 lose because of queen f7. The most resilient move is king f8, but I thought that anything wins here. Knight d4, for example, is very strong. This would be a royal fork, so the best move here is rook a8 and giving up the rook for the knight, but still I have this amazing advantage, and rook d6, for example, will come next, and yeah, anything wins here. Doubling up later on and delivering some mating stuff. So my opponent resigned, and I get an important win. Thank you for tuning in, and see you tomorrow for the next recap. Bye bye.